something that was being test flown, which really made no sense anyway. And he found out that absolutely they were not. And he still makes the point to this day that the technology these things demonstrated couldn't possibly have been anything man-made anyway. But he wanted to cover all his bases, and he's very conscious of the fact that, our partners in NATO and other sophisticated countries do not test fly objects over one country repeatedly without informing that country. This was a violation of airspace rules. So that was the only other option he could ever come up with as to what they could be, other than something entirely unexplainable. And so it was an example of a country that worked very, very hard. They even sent up F-16s. They established special radar, situations to try to capture them on radar. And another great thing about this case is this photograph that was taken, which has been highly analyzed by many different labs, and, they know who took it. They know all the circumstances of the photograph, and we have copies of this in the book, and some people may have seen various versions of it online, but to me, in my opinion, it's one of the best UFO photographs ever taken, and it's just such strong evidence for the physicality and the unique qualities of this phenomenon. So I think that his chapter is really, really strong, and that the Belgian wave is just straightforwardly one of the most, really establishes the reality of this. And like you said, this is a major general. You can read the bios of these people in the books, and they're all, as you said, James, really accomplished career people who would have no reason. Obviously, they're just speaking the truth and speaking from their own experience, and so it's mind-boggling to me, that case. And the drawings are all very similar, different people in different locations at different times. There's variations, as you would expect, and there are obviously more than one object that was seen over Belgium. But it's so mysterious as to why this particular country at this particular time, these repeated visits. And that, of course, that question was never answered. But so I think the drawings are also, which open up the book, also are very interesting to look at, and gives the reader something visual too.
Most people see in the triangle, right? It was a triangle with 3 points of light on each corner.
Yeah, that was the most typical one, and a reddish light in the center. And some people saw sort of windows on the top, like a sort of a low dome on the top, or they could see panels that might have been windows. I mean, there were lots of very close-up sightings of this thing, and it had the characteristic silence that we always hear about, taking off extremely fast from a hovering position, those kinds of qualities that we hear so often about, low flying, kind of gliding, huge thing.
Well, I had one fly right over my head here, and
one of these triangular ones?
Yeah, it was treetop level, and it flew over my head, and I was standing out in the field there. It came over the trees, and I felt it. I felt something behind me, and I turned around and I looked up, and here's this massive triangle ship flying right just above the trees over me, and it had it looked. What was weird about it, it didn't look completely physical. It was, and it made no sound. You didn't hear a peep, no sound whatsoever. And the birds were all singing like crazy, and all of a sudden everything just stopped. It was dead silence when this thing came in, because its field somehow affected, the animals. And when it flew over, it started to bank and make a turn. After it passed over my head, I was right underneath it looking up at it, and it started to bank and made a turn. And then it flashed these red lights at the back of it, like 3 or 4 big flashes, like boom, 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 like this, and almost like saying hi. And then it vanished. It totally went from an almost physical object. It just phased out. And
that's probably what you mean by maybe it didn't appear entirely physical, right? It didn't seem to take off. It seemed to disappear.
Yeah, it just phased out. And I know what that did to my mind, and I know other people would have the same thing, is that when you see something that big flying over your head, and it's not even pushing air, making any noise, nothing, you don't hear anything, and then it's not quite physical, your mind starts really messing with you, and it tries to talk you out of it. Like,
you didn't really see it or something like that.
Yeah, it's almost it tries to shove it back in the corner somewhere like it didn't happen.
Right.
And I've gone, and I had to just sit there with it for a while going, what the hell was that? I mean, my other senses couldn't grab it. It broke all programs, in my mind, and so I had to actually add that to my programs. And the research they've done, this is you've probably heard about this research, is they found that you actually see with your brain, and that your eyes are picking up billions of bits of information, but your brain is choosing out of that information what's going to be your reality.
So it's sort of your brain is like a filter.
Exactly.
For what your eyes see.
So you can see why so many people have different experiences around these objects, because they don't have the reference points for them, or they don't have any images or symbols or anything to wrap their head around some of these things.
Which is also why they're so strongly affected by it when they do see them as well.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I saw that same object firsthand, up close and personal, and unfortunately, as 99% happens, we see things up here and we don't have a camera on us. So I didn't get any footage of it.
Well, that so happens. I think it's an important point, James, because so many people say, okay, well, there are all these UFOs. How come we don't have a lot more pictures? Well, and I've talked to so many witnesses who, like you, don't happen to have a camera with them. And even if they think they might have a couple of minutes before the thing disappears, the last thing they want to do is take their eyes off this extraordinary thing that they're watching and go look for their camera.
Exactly.
I mean, people just, you're absolutely awestruck. You're fixated. You're staring at this thing and you're thinking, oh, my God, right? Who's going to want to take their eyes off it and go in the house or rummage around and try to find the camera? It's just so common that people don't want to do that, and it's completely understandable to me that, they wouldn't. So I think that so much explains why we don't have more, and I mean really good photographs, that can be legitimized and studied and so on. We're very fortunate to have that one from Belgium, but the reason we don't have more from Belgium, where there were so many sightings, is for the very reason that you just brought up. Of course, and then they didn't have all this digital photography and cell phones with cameras and everything, but there's other problems with all of that. But anyway, I think it's a really important point about the whole issue with taking photographs when you're watching something as extraordinary as this.
Yeah, your point is really well taken, because what we had here is I had a Qigong master and a Kung Fu master. This guy is extremely trained, fearless, unbelievable. He's standing out in the field with a $7,000 movie camera around his neck. I mean, the best of the best cameras. And and he says, I'm not going to go public till they drop in close, so I can see them really close. Well, 3 ships came in right over our heads. One dropped down, flew right over his head, and then went back up and joined the other ships. And he's standing there just frozen, with his mouth open, and with this $7,000 camera around his neck. And he didn't even know he had a camera at the time. And he was in such, so stunned by the experience. He came out of it with me laughing, and he goes, what's so funny? And I pointed at the camera around his neck, and he goes, oh, my God. Like he was so upset about it.
That's
and I
so
told
interesting.
him, I told him, I said, that's the first response. That's what, that's totally.
Even with a guy like that who was planning to take a movie.
Exactly. And also,
did he ever get another opportunity to take something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he got some real good footage. They actually followed him in a plane. He received a telepathic message that they would be following him from Portland to L.A. He was flying in a commercial plane. And, he called me up and he was really upset about it. And he said, I keep getting this message. And I said, well, it's like, he goes, I think I'm going crazy. And I said, well, I said, probably a good idea to just take your camera on the plane.
Right.
And if they don't show, you're probably crazy. Because I knew they were going to show. I knew they were going to show.
Was it a daytime flight or nighttime?
Yeah, daytime flight. And he filmed this brilliant gold object flying next to the plane that starts morphing. And it morphs into, it looked like several things. One looked like a giant pillar. It morphed into a giant golden pillar. And then it morphed into an arrowhead. Looked like an arrowhead. And then it morphed into a hand, a perfect hand. and we have all this on film.
Wow.
And then I looked at the hand, and that's the Hebrew sign for God, the way this hand was being held.
Mm-hmm.
And it blew me away when I looked at this thing, but, anybody else looking at it. And then, so I showed it to some top scientists, and they go, oh, that's nothing more than a weather balloon being kicked around in the jet stream, and I said...
In the shape of a hand?
Yeah, and I said, well, wait a minute, this object is flying from north to south, and the jet streams are coming in the opposite, direction. So it's not in the jet stream, it's matching the speed of the plane, and that just totally undoes that program that you're trying to run. And this is undeniably morphing into symbols, and then it turns into a disc again, and then just takes off. So,
wow.
So it dropped down as a little metal disc. It looked like it was floating and falling, and then all of a sudden it powers up and turns into this big golden light, and then it starts morphing into all these different shapes. So that's some. Is that
among the best footage you've seen of these objects?
No, that's really old footage. I'd probably have to dig it out of the closet, basically. But we have better stuff. We have stuff that is even better than that. That's just mind blowing. Yeah,
I've seen some of it, but I may not have seen your more recent stuff.
Oh yeah, we have these objects coming out of the mountain, and they fly right towards us, and they have these rotating fields on them. And they fly right at the camera, and they're huge when they're coming from the mountain, and they get smaller as they come to the camera, and then turn and make a nice turn right in front of the camera, and then phase out and disappear, which really fits physics, if people understand physics, because the more powerful, the higher dimension, the smaller the particle. So these objects would come in so we could see them. They'd be very huge, and then they would go back to their reality and actually become very small.
Interesting.
And then phase out.
Interesting. Well, you certainly do have an interesting life up there, James.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to go to the eSETI.org website and check it out.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, we're so far outside of the box because we've gone so far beyond just, the nuts and bolts physicality, and we've gone far into the other dimensions and the beings and who are they, and actually have physical evidence of them appearing and filming them in photographs, by Japanese monks and people like that. So we're not really there for the mainstream. It's for people that are really serious about experiencing the higher dimensions, you might say, or the ones that come here.
And, my role, of course, is to try to break through this mainstream barrier. And the only thing I have to be very careful about what information I actually present, because these people, if you think about a member of Congress or, someone from the National Academy of Sciences, they're only going to work with this very basic physical evidence of a phenomenon. And when you start talking about anything beyond that, you lose them completely.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think that there's sort of all these things happening parallel to each other. And, I'm just staying very focused on my particular job here, which I think is to try to, and hopefully everything will eventually kind of merge into one pathway that we're on here. But what I'm trying to do is bring this sort of backwards thinking, people who actually have authority and can actually do something about the situation that we have within the scientific community, et cetera. So I love the kind of stuff you're doing, but unfortunately I have to sort of stay on a certain path in terms of my professional work anyway to get access to these kinds of people and to try to get them